After the cold plunge.
It's the before and after. I'm the sick guy before. That's me. Hey, today it's a little bit of false advertising, but I don't want to bum you out. It's not just going to be what was on the title, 10 reasons why you need to renovate your pool. We're going to be talking about some different things. I'm going to handle some structural issues, and then Rick Speck, after I'm done, is going to handle some of the more internal issues with plaster. But this is what everybody wants, especially, as far as commercial. This is what everybody wants, right? Their pool to look like. And unfortunately, over time, you start getting some issues. Oops, that went too fast. The issues really pile up. You start getting some things like that, some cracks. And then this is actually one that I went and looked at. The only people that were happy were the frogs. And then you start getting some major issues. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of these things as we go. The first thing I want to do is I was in the pool business. I had a service route for 11 years. And I never knew, actually, how a pool was built. Now, I don't want some of you guys to fall asleep that have built a bunch of pools, but I think it's important for us to at least understand how a pool is built so that we can start understanding where the problems are, what they are, and how to improve or alleviate them. So when you build a pool, and I'm going to fly through this hopefully as quickly as I can. When you build a pool, you start with dirt. Then you dig a hole. This thing really is weird. Then you dig a hole, right? And you notice that little area that's a little bigger. If you don't know what that is, we'll get to it. That's called the bond beam. And so now you put in a rebar cage after you dig your hole. And it looks like that. Has anybody ever seen a pool looking like that? It's got the rebar in there. You got your dobies in there. The reason for the dobies is try to keep it about 3 inches off the dirt, right? So what's the next step after you get all the steel in there? Is you put in the gunite. A gunite crew. If you've never seen one before, this thing's really not working too well. They always put the biggest guy on the hose, on the nozzle there. This is a, I believe it's a dry shot. I think wet shot is what's being used a lot now. I unfortunately used dry shot in my pool when I built mine. By the way, I built my own pool, and that taught me I should never build another pool. But I used dry shot and ended up paying a whole bunch of money to haul off all the rebound. There was several low boys full of rebound because I had a real high bond beam. But anyway, that looks like a dry shot there. You build that up from the dirt. You build it up little by little, covering up your rebar, and you end up with a shell. If your shell is too thin, you end up with cracks. We had one in Irvine. It's in Irvine, and we came into it and it looked like that, and we said we don't even want to touch this thing because if you look, those lines kind of line up. They were long and they lined up with the rebar, so we knew that something was going on. It was probably shallow, and it ended up being extremely shallow floor. And so if we got involved, we would have been in a lot of trouble. So you built your bond beam on the top, and what goes on the bond beam? That's your coping. Then you put on your tile. I can't get this thing to work. All right. Next, you put in your foam for your expansion joint, right? Because we don't have a deck here. So then you got to pour your deck. This is if you have a concrete deck, and then you put your mastic on top of that. This is, well, no, we got one more thing. What's the last thing we got to do? Got to plaster the darn thing, right? Well, there's your expansion joint, your foam. Now you got to plaster it. So now you got your plaster. So here is your structure of your pool. And it goes in that order. By the way, when you put your coping in, the important thing about putting the coping in is that sets your elevation for your whole job. We learned that, or I learned that at some point as well. Then you put your water in right after it's plastered. So now we start getting into some of the things that can happen. Once you understand the structure of the pool, how it's built, now we got to look at some of the things to look for once things start going, getting old and things start moving. So this is your expansion joint that you see there, and if you notice, especially down in this area, you can see that it has separated. That's wider than any expansion joint that you want. By the way, do you know what the whole reason for the expansion joint, I'll just tell you, is to separate your deck from the shell. You have to have a separation. If you don't have a separation, now your deck, when it expands and contracts and moves, it's gonna cause problems. It's either gonna, in this case, pull away from your pool, or it's gonna creep up and bump into your pool, and that can cause some big problems. So when it does move away like that, and you have that hole, or that slot where the water can go, what's the big problem with that? Well, we're going to look at what the big problem with that is. You can grow a garden in there, by the way. I see this a lot. Those are herbs. Yeah, that's pretty unsightly. All right, so let's start talking a little bit about what happens when you have that split in between your deck and your coping. It's like I don't have the pointer. Not as fancy as mine. Anyway, that place where it says expansion joint, you see how the concrete goes up. That can either lift the whole panel or it can crack and raise the panel right by your coping. Now the reason why that happens is if you have that space between the deck and the coping and water gets in there, what happens is the soil expands. And as the soil expands, it lifts up the deck. It's amazing how powerful that is. Expansive soil, you get it wet, and it will raise your deck. I'm sure you've all run into this before, but I'm just pointing out some things that need attention. It's amazing that mastic, a fairly small part of this whole structure, and it's a high maintenance part, but the damage that it can do is pretty amazing if it's not kept up. Here's just some pictures. You can see here that it even took the mastic with it. You can see the expansion foam that was in there, but when you don't keep up with it, water gets in there, it raises your deck. Now you can't even pour mastic there anymore. Another picture. Sometimes it can even make sharp edges that I know on a commercial standpoint the health department gets pretty upset with. So what do you do when you have this situation? Now that we've got the situation, what do we do with it? Well, you can grind down your deck. Do we have any of the concrete grinders here? There's a company that does that I really like, that they grind that down, make it flat. It's very difficult to do because you have to grind it back far enough so that you don't end up with a valley. And that valley is no good. So then you put your sand and your mastic in. So now here's another issue we had before where the deck actually raised because of the expansive soil. You can also have the opposite issue. You see here where the deck is lower. That can be for a few different reasons. Very rarely it's because your pool is raised. I don't know if you guys have ever seen one of those, but it's very rare. Typically what we have is a deck problem where it's sinking. So in a situation like that, it could be because the water gets in and it actually takes away. You might have a leak even, and it takes away some of the dirt underneath, and it can cause the deck to sink. It can just be from shifting. Here's one of my favorite ones because it shows a deck that is sunk. And at one point the deck wasn't too bad of a problem, and so what they did is they put in some extra material on top of the concrete. A couple of reasons why that didn't work. You can see how they feathered it in over here and feathered it in over there, and that's the thick part, and at that point it really helped. Number one, you're not getting rid of the problem. And number two, putting that cold joint on there, it doesn't work very well. Now, there are companies that can coat and try to build that up. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. This is that pooling of water that I was talking about. Now, in this case, that just sunk it. Even if this did lift and you ground it at the wrong angle, it'll just pool water. All right, I don't even know where I am on this thing at this point. This thing's going crazy. Okay, so what happens when you have your deck? I don't know what's going on here. I didn't have the right slide. James here? It's going crazy, but anyway, I guess I'll just talk about each slide, even though it's not in the right order. There are cases where the pool can lift. You ever seen a pool like that? That pool turned into a boat. You've seen a fiberglass pool do that? Yeah. Obviously, this isn't around here, but even if a pool just goes up a few inches, it's pretty much a full redo. That happens when you empty a pool, the water table's up, and it floats like that. So here's a situation where you've got the deck, and I talked about how it moves. You've got this part of the deck moving this way, this part of the deck moving that way. This tears apart your mastic joint. This side over here, it starts breaking up your coping. Hopefully we can get to this. When you do break up the coping, when you do get a crack, a lot of times it has to do with the fact that the deck, when you put in the foam, it didn't go all the way down to the dirt, and you have something, a bridge there between the concrete deck and the coping. So what's the problem with that? You can see some of it there. The problem is then you start getting that crack and the coping becomes loose. You guys have all seen loose coping. You've probably all seen that crack between the tile and the coping. There's a good shot of it. That's when it starts getting severe. So what's the problem when you get a crack like that? There's a few problems, but one of the problems is that water gets in that crack. Well, we know what happens. It not only can deteriorate your bond beam, it can expand your soil behind the coping and cause deck problems, but it can also call out for roots. Any trees. I don't know, you guys have probably heard when people say, no, you need to have a palm tree around a pool. Now, the palm trees are nice because they don't drop a ton of leaves, right? That's nice. However, palm trees, it's amazing. If you guys have ever pulled up a deck where there's especially clean palms, you get a mat of roots like that. Now, if the roots have a place to go drink, they're going to go get it. And that's what happened on this pool, is they went and got it from the pool and kept growing and growing and lifted the coping all the way around the pool. So taking care of that, and I don't know if you can see this very well, but at one point there was just a crack and it was tried to patch up with silicone. That can work for a little while, but there's a reason why it happened in the first place, and that is because the deck bumped into the coping and caused that crack, so it's just going to keep doing that. So what do you do when you have that crack between the coping and the tile? You have to reset the coping. You probably saw that I lifted the coping before this thing went haywire. You lift the coping, you reset it, you put in sand, and then the mastic. Now, there's another issue that can happen is what about when the crack is not just up here, but you have a crack that's down below that area between the tile and the coping. And some of you probably know what the issue is there. And if you can look at where the deck was poured, there was a big void down there where the concrete went down all the way to where it's touching the bond beam now. And now when the deck expands and contracts, it's not only hitting your coping, which this one, the coping's fine because you have your expansion joint there, but now it's going to be pushing on your bond beam. And that's when you get the crack down there. It can go in the middle of the tile line, it can be all the way down into the plaster. This is where that concrete deck is actually making contact with the bond beam. And here's an outside corner of the pool, and it'll push the whole corner out. So what do you do in that case? How do you fix that sort of a situation? Well, a lot of times you got to take everything that's loose, completely get rid of it, and rebuild it. Kind of start from scratch. A lot of times you'll take off the material, and the rebar will be completely rusted through because water's been getting in through the crack, and then you got to rebuild the rebar as well. It's a big repair. Obviously, what you want is you want a nice, clean expansion joint with mastic, keeping the water out. Did you know that mastic, the only reason for mastic is to keep the water out of the expansion joint? You know, a lot of people talk about how, oh no, it cushions it, and it doesn't cushion anything. All it does is keep the water out. But you need to have that separation. So I just wanted to give you kind of a base idea of the structure of a pool and this outside issue that you can have outside the structure. Something that you guys can look at, you can kind of know what it is and then go about trying to fix it. Rick is going to come up now and he's going to talk, oh, that's right, I had one more slide. Ounce of preventions with pounded care. Rick's going to come up and talk about if this thing will work. When it's time to actually renovate a pool, and I know you guys love those guys, right? They're the ones who use the pool. Yeah.
I do service, and I ran into a pool that had rust, from the rebar being too close. So the guy kind of removed the cover on top, and noticed that the one out was only about half an inch above that rebar. How many inches is it supposed to be?
That's a good question. So typically the floor of a pool is going to be 6 inches thick.
The rebar?
No, 6 inches completely, and the rebar should be 3 inches, so it should be right in the middle. Now what happens when you have a pool that gets replastered 4 times over its life, which isn't that's 40 years. Pools have been around for a lot longer than that. So what happens when you have a pool that's been replastered 40 years and it's been chipped? Every time you chip it, you're getting rid of a little bit of gunite. And every time you get rid of a little bit of gunite, you're getting closer and closer to that steel. The closer you get, the more it's going to get wet, and it's going to rust, and it's going to start blowing apart that shell. So that's a good question, and once you start getting that too much, then you're going to have to do something to build that up.
It was built in 2020. It's like when the rust all the way down, it might be fine.
Do you remember that one picture that I showed where it had those cracks? That's where it was too thin, and that gunite guy didn't spend enough time on there.
So generally, if they to do that, would they be able to strip it and then put gunite back on top of it, or they got to take it all out?
You don't have to take it out. You can build up a couple of few inches of shell.
Yeah.
By the way, that's a good commercial for our hydroblasting, because hydroblasting doesn't chip it out. It just takes the 40,000 psi water, takes off the plaster just enough to be able to get to the gunite, not through the gunite. So you're not eating it away every time you replaster. But I'm not going to do a commercial. All right. What was that? No? Okay. Rick Specht is our, what are you, Rick? You run our H2O leak pros and a bunch of other stuff. So, here's Rick. He's going to talk to you a little bit about the inside part of the pool.
So I'm Rick Speck. I run H2O Elite Pros, which is a division of Allen Smith Pools. I built pools for many years, remodeled pools for many years. So you appreciate what Kevin talked about in regards to the basic construction of pools. So we're going to talk a little bit about things that you guys see. So I'd like to get some hands first of all. So how many of you guys actually do repairs? So maybe a third.
You mean equipment repairs?
Just anything. Just any repairs. Okay. How many of you guys do mastic? Very few. So that's one of the things that we see a lot. And Kevin really kind of highlighted why that's important. So most people think mastic around the coping is just for aesthetics. It's just because it looks better when it doesn't have a big crack. But really, that's not the reason you want it. It's nice to look good, but it's really a matter of what other things it's going to cause. So he talked about sometimes a deck will, if you have expansive soils, will lift. It can hinge the deck and break it. If water gets down there, if you don't have expansive soils, it'll actually settle that soil and it'll break. But there are other issues that can happen. If you start to settle soil or expand it, and it's near any plumbing, so if you have returns, they're relatively shallow, right, in the pool. So you have returns in all your pools, commercial or residential. So those returns, if the ground starts to settle, it starts to put some weight on that pipe, and eventually you're going to get that pipe's going to break. And so that's one of the things that you guys want to do as pool guys. Either you do it, have somebody else do it. We actually do mastic. If you're interested, we can do it for you, but it is important. So we're just going to kind of touch about some things that, aside from the ducts, we can't fix that for you. But some things that you guys want to be looking for. So whether you do repairs or not, and we can do repairs for you if you'd like, but the key is you want to know what to look for, what's important. So let's go through a few. So here we see what? That plaster is not happy, right? So what's happened there? Well, a couple things we'll talk about. Obviously, the spalling means that plaster has failed. It's at the end of its serviceable life. So what is the serviceable life for plaster? Well, that's kind of a touchy question because it depends on a lot of factors. The number one thing that determines how long that plaster is going to last is you guys, the pool professional. It's water chemistry. And so one of the things that we see a lot, and we're going to touch on this for just a moment, is you guys all check your chlorine and pH. Hopefully you're checking your total alkalinity too. But there are other things that you need to keep an eye on because all of those things, we talk about water balance, right? Does everybody know what the LSI is? So a few. If not, come see me at the booth afterwards and we'll kind of talk about it. That's Langner's saturation index. It kind of tells whether water is scaling or balanced or corrosive. And there's a lot of factors that will affect that. Things that will do that prematurely. So if your water is too aggressive, it'll eat that plaster, soften it. One of the things that we see a lot of times is for commercial spas, you will drain the spa relatively regularly. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, you got to make sure that you're checking for calcium. And so what happens with water? Water's always looking for calcium. And so if you don't supply calcium and coming out of the tap it's too low, it's going to find it somewhere else. Where do you think it's going to find that calcium? Plaster. Calcium is found in anything that has a cement base, which is plaster, grout, and it'll pull it out of that finish, weaken the finish, and it will make that happen much faster. So it's important for you guys to be checking your calcium. We just finished a big pool yesterday, and coming out of the tap, the calcium level is at 60. It's very low. This particular pool, it's going to take about 450 pounds of calcium. So it's something you want to be checking. Don't just take it for granted that it's okay, because it is important. This can be one of the results. The other thing that can cause that is when guys are just checking your pH and you're not checking your total alkalinity. Because without keeping your alkalinity within balance, your pH bounces. And again, you shorten the life of the plaster. So plaster is always going to wear out, will always wear out faster in a spa than a pool, but improper water chemistry is going to speed that up. So to protect yourselves, as the pool professionals, you want to be checking those things. Again, you want to be the good guy. You want to be the one that your customers, whether they're residential or commercial, can trust you. And part of that is making sure that you have the knowledge to make sure that you're protecting the investment. Now here again, we see issues. You see it there in the corner where the plaster is missing. So what's another issue you see going on there? What do you think?
Coloration.
Is there something wrong with the tablet floater? That's a trick question. So I heard it from a few of you. So nothing wrong with a tablet floater, except that typically what will happen is while the pool's running, you're probably fine. And then when it shuts off, the floater almost always ends up near a step. And so while the equipment is off and the pool's just sitting stagnant, what's happening with that chlorine inside that floater? It's continuing to dissolve, right? And the pH on a tablet is about 2.8, very acidic, and so it's eating up your plaster. So a lot of times we'll go and we'll see the top step is eaten up and everything else is fine. That's the reason. So if you're going to use a floater, tie it off somewhere. The easiest way is to get a string and tie it off to your skimmer, somewhere where it's deep. So at least if it shuts off, it's not sitting right above plaster. I'd much rather say you never use a floater. If you're going to use tablet chlorine, put in a feeder. That's much better. But if you're going to have a floater, don't allow that to happen. The other thing that we see sometimes is well, people will use too many tablets. So Darren's aware of this. He's here in our class today. But we had a spa where somebody asked me to come out and take a look at it. So just a hot tub only, no pool, and it had 3 floaters full of chlorine. So destroyed the heater that was about 2 months old and did quite a bit of damage to the plaster as well. So something you guys want to be aware of. You're the professionals, so it's something important. So what's another danger to having too many tablets in a pool? So it can, if you don't put it in the right place, it can do that. What else can happen?
Your TAs get
TA what?
The TAs get down, they nosedive.
Okay, it can drop the total alkalinity, absolutely. What else?
Chlorine and cyanuric acid.
Why? You can get a chlorine lock, and why? Because what's one of the elements to a tablet is trichlorine, right? Trichlor. So what is contained in there that can present a problem? Has cyanuric. So is cyanuric good for a pool? Absolutely. But as with most things, more isn't always better. So you can get too much and then have other problems. So something you want to be careful of. Here again, we see damage to the plaster, and some of these things are going to end up where you're going to be forced to replaster a pool. It's too far. So hopefully we can help you if you need to replaster it, but perhaps you can catch these things before they happen. Some of these things, or many of these things, are related to water chemistry. And as you guys are observant, then you can catch a lot of these things. You're the good guy to your customers, and you can present or prevent a lot of the problems. You're right, Kevin, that really did jump. Here's a good one. So what's happened here? I think Kevin showed this, didn't you? Maybe you were going to. Maybe it jumped ahead for you. So what's going on there? Have you ever seen that? What is it? It looks like stucco. That's plaster. It's supposed to be smooth white plaster. So what's happening? That's scale. So if you put your hand on that, or someone tries to go swimming in that, you might have a customer one time, they say, every time we go in it, it tears our bathing suits. That's why. It's the scale. It's hard water. So can that be removed? Yes. Mechanically is the best way to do it. So you literally have to take a diamond pad and sand and grind that down. And we do them all the time. So we can help you to do that, but the reason that happened is because of water chemistry. So something that you can avoid by having proper water chemistry. Then we talked about the structural cracks. A lot of that is caused by, if you have a leak in a pool, inevitably it will always get worse. So as water gets behind that crack into the shell, it'll actually start to dissolve that shell. It will break it down. So Kevin showed a slide a few minutes ago where it showed where he said if it gets that bad, you have to remove all the loose material, and you saw the rebar. But you saw, as you mentioned, that rebar was very shallow. And did you see what was behind it? Did you see that picture? It looked like dirt. That may have been a shell at one time, but it actually was dissolved. So there's nothing left. It just becomes like sand. And so when you have a leak, it's something where you want to address sooner rather than later. It will always get more expensive as time goes on because it starts to deteriorate and break things down. Okay, here you talked about rebar on the surface. A telltale sign of rebar, sometimes we'll assume what it is. You can take a diamond pad or even a little bit of acid if you're careful and see if it's just something topical. What do you see there? So it's not rebar, is it? It's something. So that's why you have to see what it is. Sometimes, it's all right. Sometimes it's just on the surface.
Just on the surface.
Thank you, James. Here, you take mine. So sometimes what will happen is you'll even see sometimes the outline of a paper clip or a hairpin or something, and you know what it was. Other times you're not sure. If it's just topical, you can remove that, either with a diamond pad or a little bit of acid, and you're good. If it is rebar, then you have to address that. It's not going to go away. It's going to get worse. So the way to treat that is you have to cut it out and see what's going on. Is it too thin? A lot of times you're going to have to cut that steel out. You're going to have to treat the metal. You're going to have to waterproof it and then do a patch. We can do it. We can help you to do it. But it's something you won't address. It's not going to get better. And if you're having water penetrate through there, it's only going to get worse. Once you get water behind that, the repair is going to get much more expensive and much more difficult to repair. So something you want to address sooner rather than later. Now, you may have seen this. This picture doesn't show it really good, but have you ever had a pool that was not level? Anybody here? Okay, so a few of you. So a number of things can cause that. When you have a pool that's out of level, it could be where something actually just settled. It can be sometimes where there was a leak in the pool, and again, if it's not expansive soil, it will actually settle. And eventually, the weight of that pool will push it down. Other times, Kevin showed you a picture of a pool that actually floated. Now, I've seen hundreds and hundreds of pools that have floated. I've never seen one that high. But typically, when they lift, the problem is because of too much groundwater. People go, well, how could it lift a pool? Well, have you ever seen an aircraft carrier in the water? Very heavy. Water can displace it. So the same thing can happen with a pool, but if it settles, now it can be unlevel, or it could have lifted and floated. And so the repair on that can be challenging. You got to look at it. So if you have a pool that's not level, call us up. We'll go out and take a look at it for you because we have to determine what the best fix is. Sometimes it's a matter of cutting the beam and redoing the tile, but you have to find out why it happened so that you can try to get the bottom of it. But something you want to be aware of. That's the same pool that was not in level?
Bottom of the tile there.
So, and some of these pools are not just a little out of level. Sometimes you'll see where it's at the top of the tile on one end of the pool and it's below the tile on the other. They'll move that much. And again, if you just let it go, it's going to get worse and going to get more costly. So anything to do with structural like that, you really want to address it. You want to be forthright with your customer because you're really protecting their interests and you're going to be the good guy. And you can repair some of these things yourself. If you're not, call somebody else. We can certainly help you with it. But these structural issues really get more expensive over time. So you saw how a pool is supposed to be constructed, and some things had nothing to do with construction. Some do, but as a professional, you want to be observant and be looking. So sometimes you just see a pool over and over again, and you don't notice what's going on. But you want to make sure you're looking so that you can address these things. We talked about mastic. Again, a homeowner, or maybe even a property manager, just thinks it's for looks. But you want to help them to appreciate that if they don't do it, it's going to get far more costly if they don't address it. If you have a crack in a shell, Kevin showed you a number of pictures where those were actually structural cracks. If you don't address that, water's going to get behind there. It will cause more problems over time. So you have to address it. The sooner you address it, the easier it is to make that repair. If you have a pool that's out of level, if it was level and all of a sudden it's not, something's going on. You have to address it. The first thing you'd want to determine is the pool leaking? So a homeowner may not know if a pool is leaking, especially if they have an autofill. But you guys know. So how do you know if a pool is leaking? If they have an autofill.
Cams are dropping a lot.
Can't keep salt in a pool, can't keep conditioner in a pool, can't keep chlorine in a pool, right? Those things don't just go away. So that's a telltale sign. And so if you think a pool's leaking, everyone's heard of the bucket test, right? Is everybody aware of how that works? If you're not sure, come see me in the booth and I'll explain it to you. But it's important to know if a pool's leaking. Again, how much should a pool leak or evaporate? We'll put it that way. How much should a pool evaporate in 24 hours? Okay.
Depends on the weather.
Okay. In general, here in the United States, the average answer is it's a quarter of an inch in 24 hours. That's not a wrong answer, except that, as I heard some of your comments, there are varying factors to that. How hot do they keep the pool? Right? How many things do they have that are aerating the water? Do they have waterfalls, spillways? Do they have deck jets? All those things will affect, anytime you aerate water, you get more of an evaporation. But the number one contributing factor to evaporation is wind. If you have a pool where there's a lot of wind there, you can lose a lot of water. So it's really going to be, you're going to determine whether a pool has a leak or not because of your water chemistry. You're going to catch it before a homeowner realizes. If you're not sure, and if you're going to do a bucket test, obviously the first thing you have to do, turn off your autofill, right? Otherwise you're not going to get an accurate reading. But a lot of, sorry, go ahead.
And you gotta get a bucket.
You need a bucket too. And Kevin will supply that for you if you need one, so he'll take care of you. So there are other ways to test for that, and we could do that for you, but it's something you want to know. Again, if it's water's going somewhere, it's causing a problem somewhere, so you want to address it. And so some of these things will just be a simple repair, but other things, if they've been going on long enough, then you're forced into perhaps doing a remodel. If it's a major structural crack in a pool, you're probably going to replaster the pool. And so we can help you to do that, but you kind of want to know what you're looking at. And when you're talking to your homeowner when they're having issues, you want to come across as being educated and understand what you're looking at. So you need to understand, is this just a surface crack? We looked at a picture. Let's see if we can get back to it. Is that surface or a structural? What do you think?
Surface.
Okay. And why do you think it's just surface? Because you don't see any big gaping holes, right? But what I would suspect is it is, in fact, structural. Yeah. So it looks different. So you may not know the difference, but when you drain a pool or a spa, that's when you're going to see all the cracks. So you may not have seen any cracks. You drain your pool for whatever reason, to acid wash it, to do something else, and all of a sudden you see this. If you see water coming out, that means water's going in the other way when it's full. So you have a problem. That problem is going to get worse. So you want to address it. In this case, with that many cracks, that needs to get resurfaced. And again, resurfacing it, is that going to be expensive? Relatively, yes. But if you let it go, it's not going to be cheaper because it's going to start to break down that shell, and now you're going to have lots of rebuild to put it back together and even be able to resurface it. So you want to be able to look at those things and determine, especially when it comes to structural cracks. Here, that's a perfect example. You see it goes all the way up into the tile line, back below that main drain, and then back down. That's a huge structural crack. That one, there's no guessing about it. But again, water's penetrating through there. You could put some pool putty in there. Everybody's probably used that for a small crack. And you could stop that water from leaking temporarily. But eventually it's going to leak again. And again, the problem is, where has that water gone and what's it doing behind it? So in this case, that's probably more than what most of you are probably going to want to address. But you're going to want to address it sooner rather than later. And so once we drain it, we fix it, then you can address how extensive it has to be. But it's going to get more expensive if they let it go. So you as a professional want to know what you're looking at to determine how to fix it. That's something Kevin didn't touch on, but an interesting, talk to him afterwards. He'll tell you what that was and how he fixed it. That was the after. Too far.
What are you trying to do?
That's right. Let's jump around. So again, when it's structural, you may or may not be able to determine that. And it's typically going to require some relatively large amount of work. But those are some of the things that you're going to look at when it's time to really remodel a pool, is when it has to do with those type of things. So if you have a structural issue, a leak, determine what it is. We can help you to do that, even if it's just coming out and looking at it for you. But the sooner you get to it, the better. And one of the things that, again, you're going to want to keep in mind to help you guys is stay on top of your water chemistry, because that's going to prevent some of these problems. Because if you don't take care of the water chemistry and the plaster breaks down prematurely, then water's going to penetrate through there. The shell is the structure. That's what Kevin showed you. That's the backbone. That's what gives everything the strength. But it's not waterproofing. So when the plaster goes over it, when water starts to penetrate through there, especially through returns, you see a return there above that light to the left and up there. That's one of the first places water will tend to penetrate, is through that extrusion. And so you want to address that sooner rather than later. But proper water chemistry, including, again, know your LSI index. Again, if you don't know about it, come see me afterwards and we can talk about it. But check your calcium. You don't have to check it every week. You don't have to check it every month. Quarterly or even twice a year is probably sufficient. But if you don't check it, eventually you're going to have other problems that will come back and haunt you. We talked about cyanuric acid levels. So there are a number of issues that happen with having too much sign urine. So we won't need to get into it a lot now, but again, sometimes people think, well, if a little bit's good, more is better. When I first got in the pool business, I was told you always want to keep your conditioner level at 100 or 150. I was taught wrong. That's not right. With white plaster, you can kind of get away with that. If you have a colored plaster or pebble, it gets much worse. It causes more problems than you might know. So it affects the pigment, it affects the coloring. So, part of that is when you're looking at a pool, is it stained or is it something else? A stain might be able to be removed. If it's something more, perhaps you have to resurface the pool. So if you need any recommendations, any advice, call us up here at the company. You can text us and we'll help you with that. But knowing what you're looking at sometimes is helpful. And that's what we're here to try and do, is to help you guys to know what you're looking at. And if you're not sure, there's nothing wrong with saying that. Just ask for a little bit of advice and we can steer you in the right direction. Any questions on anything we've discussed? Okay. So again, you guys are the professionals. We have full confidence in you. But when you run into something that you haven't run into before, a pool out of level, a structural crack, or you know you have a leak, call us up and we want to help you out. Okay? And all right, well, thank you all for your time. Enjoy your lunch.
Hey guys, one second.
All right, James wants to talk to you.
Resurfacing, right? Resurfacing, right? Okay. Anyways, just a quick announcement. If you guys didn't see at the front, we are doing a 50-50 raffle. I don't think I've really announced that. So half the proceeds are going to one lucky winner. Cash prize, depending if we have enough cash or whoever paid. You can also pay Venmo. And then also the other 50% we're giving to UPA to help out a pool service that lost their route in the fires. So it's going towards a good cause, good donation. So if you guys are interested in winning some cash, definitely check that out. Got 15 minutes till the next class. Don't forget to grab a ticket from Robin in the back. Scott has one more quick announcement.
Yeah, during the lunch hour, we're going to do the ice bath challenge. If I can make I'm going to donate $100 a minute for every minute I can be in there to the children's nutrition program. What we're going to do is anybody that does an ice bath, we're going to accumulate your time, and I'm going to try and beat all your times. So we'll just see how that works out. Huh? Just trying to make it fun. So anyway, if you guys want an ice bath, I'll see you over there during the lunch hour.
Doesn't matter where it is, something on it, pour it in place.
when starting, make sure it's not leaking. Because no matter what you do, if it's still leaking, it's going to have to cause something else. So that's the first thing to happen is make sure it's not leaking and kind of figure out why it's happening. And then you can determine, okay, which is going to be better. You know, the coping will be better.
And of course,
And I've seen people cut around it and put in a brick ribbon. Yeah, that can be done. But again, you still want to know what's going on. You're getting a lot of movement going crazy.
By the way, so then they tore it all down. We were so happy. It's gone. The whole thing's gone. So was it the Charles? Charles is my friend. He's great. So we did too.
And those things always come back. It's always, you get away with the first few things, and all of a sudden everything breaks. I had a house in Oregon that was built in 1910. And every time we fix something, it's being fixed, we go back and find it. And different contractors over the years are trying to do different things, they're all trying it a different way. And now you have to, nothing is ever same, it's all, everything's got to start all over. School of what they find nothing. Well, there's years, but who knows? Even if there was people alive to fix it, who knows when? What did you do?
Sales to keep everyone positive starting in 10 minutes. We got Sean Berry from UTA who's speaking, so you are allowed to take the food inside. I know it's a little sunny about your warm day. So 10 minutes. Another announcement. We will give an ice cream challenge. Well, sale the team. It's saying I got the balls to sell during lunch from 12:30 to 1:30. Also, there is a 50-minute raffle. One lucky winner will go home with a cash prize. I believe it's up to about $700 to $800 right now. So lucky winner will go home with about $400. The other proceeds will be going to UPA. They will be donated to a school service that lost their route in the fires. So thank you everyone for donating. Thank you for being here once again. Looking forward to continuing this great event. I was just looking for you guys.
Hey, James.
Probably walked right by it. We've been in here for, oh, I see. I know, I got warm out there, huh?
Yeah, gosh.
It was funny, we were setting up yesterday and all of a sudden it started coming down.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Did it delay you guys or anything?
No, I mean, luckily we had all the awnings up and stuff, so we're good.
Okay.
You want to pop over here?
Yeah, sure. I'm actually keeping this clicker as we see if it actually works.
You want to use the one that we're using?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
work. Okay, yeah.
It's going to be that one right there.
Yeah.
Or just use that one. Yeah, I just like 2 laptops at work this morning, so I just having mine up here. Oh, really? Yeah, it's been weird. Sexy culture. Yeah, it is. We're gonna have to step our game up.
That's why we have Sean.
I'll keep making announcements. Guys, you guys, I'll try to push people in here in about 5 minutes.
How's the chicken? Yeah. Well, hopefully there's not as much left over. We had 150 burritos. Leftovers.
Also, if Campbell's Pool Service is here, come find me. Come find me. There's a really tall white guy, about 6'10", extremely handsome. You can probably find him, walking around, maybe have black sunglasses on. Dan Campbell's Pool Service. Come find me. I have something for you. No answer. Let's go see. He also has the most famous nose at any SCP store.
That's interesting. I don't know.
Feet.
Yeah, I can't really tell.
All right, we got black here. What is next?